Tomorrow about 88, and south of the city today and especially tomorrow, some low 90s. I'm KIRO 7 Pinpoint meteorologist Nick Allard.
It is warm right now, 77 degrees in downtown Seattle. I'm Ursula Royteen.
Listen on demand. Go to mynorthwest.com and click podcasts. KIRO Radio 97.3 FM. News and talk. Powered by the Pacific Northwest.
The Big Lead is brought to you by 3010 Weight Loss for Life.
The Dori Monson Show on KIRO Radio. This is The Big Lead.
Coming to you from the Carter Subaru studio and streaming on Facebook Live. Welcome! Welcome to The Big Show. One of the keys to doing a successful radio talk show is you have to be very confident. You have to project confidence. You have to have confidence as every fiber of your being. So right before I walk in the studio this afternoon, I'm picking up a couple of papers off of Nicole's desk because I've written out the order of stories that I want to do, and all the stories that she's printed out are sitting on her desk. She says to me, "Have you showered the last couple days?" What was that?
I don't know. Well,
I showered right before I came. I did show prep till 10 a.m., and then I sent you a text. I said, prep's done. Then I went upstairs. I climbed in the shower. Mm-hmm. I did my usual cleansing, and then I come in here to do the radio show.
Well, I was just making sure that, you weren't stressed and then not showering, because it's a sign.
I'm stressed.
It's a sign of something else if you aren't showering. So I was just checking in. Where'd you get that shirt?
Well, I will acknowledge that maybe I've worn this shirt once before and had not put it in the wash. It was on my valet.
And I first asked if you rode your bike in because I was trying to ease into that would make sense. Then you normally shower when you get here.
The shorts are clean. The shirt's fine.
Wow.
I'm clean from head to toe.
You smell stressed then.
Well, I am stressed. I will readily acknowledge that. Maybe, do you think
That's
it's
how sensitive I am to your, I don't know.
Do you think it's my Skechers? Think it's my Skechers? Do I have to wash my Skechers?
It could be. What'd you do? Like, did you wear them somewhere that you shouldn't have worn them?
No, I wore them.
No, it's a clear sweat smell. Sorry.
Out loud. Well, anyway, my point being that when you have to have a certain level of confidence to do a radio talk show,
they can't smell you.
It's good producer, right? But a good producer wouldn't do one of the more shattering things that one can do to one's confidence than to tell me I'm stinky.
Sorry.
I mean,
okay,
that's the last thing I want to be. That's the absolute last thing. I pride myself on my hygiene. I pride myself on never imposing anything untoward on my coworkers.
I don't know what to tell you.
Are you sure it's me?
Now you know I'm honest.
Are you sure it's me?
I'm positive. Sorry.
I want a second opinion.
I have a very sensitive
Will you go find
nose.
a coworker to smell me?
John Curley called me out on his show today for being deaf, and one of the side effects of being deaf, I think, is a heightened sense of smell. So it's probably only me that smells it.
I wish you had the keenest of hearing and a dull sense of smell.
I wish I did, too.
I wish it was the other way around.
Yep.
Jeez. Okay, so anyway, if I sound at all off my game today, I just want you to know why. Because my producer shattered my confidence, my feelings of self-worth, right before, and I'm talking seconds before the show theme music started. Crying out loud. But that is mere prelude.
It's just that's how much attention I'm paying to your well-being, because if there was a problem.
It's not my shirt. It's not my shirt. I'm checking it right now.
Well, you obviously don't smell it, or you wouldn't have come and
it's
smelled
not,
like
it's not
it.
me. It's not me. I guarantee you, it's not me.
It's your chemistry today.
Chemistry. Got no chemistry. Okay, with that as mere prelude, let's get right to the big lead.
The big lead. Top story.
I tell you what, it must be very pleasant to work in our jails, considering the caliber of criminals we're putting away these days. A 31-year-old Seattle man has been charged with second-degree assault following an alleged stabbing at the King County Jail. So this happened at 3:30 a.m., and we have obtained the charging documents. First of all, let me tell you a little bit about this guy. Ramon Saul Silva is his name. Has a criminal record as long as you can possibly imagine. He, last year, a woman called 911 because he had just assaulted her by poking her eye. She also showed deputies a mark on her neck, still remaining from the defendant strangling her to near unconsciousness in January of last year. She said that the defendant had also strangled her many more times in the past. He was also charged with an attack on an officer at the King County Jail that occurred on September 8th. In that case, he threw a slurry of feces and urine at the victim officer, hitting him in the face and torso. Can you imagine that? Being a jail guard and one of these animals throws a slurry of feces and urine into your face. In another incident, Silva and an accomplice, Ziegler, operated a motor vehicle while attempting to elude a fully marked police vehicle with its emergency lights and audible siren activated. Silva and Ziegler switched seats while the vehicle was in motion. While Silva was still operating the vehicle, he almost struck two Walmart employees who were in the parking lot. Silva retrieved a Kel-Tec .40 caliber assault rifle from the rear seat of the Explorer and aimed it directly at the trooper attempting to stop the vehicle. Silva and Ziegler fled the scene when the trooper's vehicle became disabled. So he's doing time. 70 months in prison for that. By the way, all this stuff is in that database that Mitzi Johanknick has just pulled out of for her King County detectives and deputies. So if this guy who's pulled an assault rifle on a cop during an attempted traffic stop, if he was out and police were chasing him and they wanted to find out about his criminal history, they would not have access to this from that link system because Mitzi Johanknick has decided to put every single cop in the region at grave risk because she wants to give a tiny little advantage to illegals who are also in that link system. Again, illegals are more important than the lives of police officers to King County Sheriff Mitzi Johanknick. This guy being a classic example of that. Okay, this guy was sentenced to 70 months in prison. Some of his other history, when he was a juvenile, he had a custodial assault charge in 05, in 04, in 03, two of them in 02. First-degree assault, 2003. Harassment, 2003. Theft in 2001. Illegal weapon in 2001. 2 counts of assault 4 in 2001. Okay, so let's bring you up to what happened in the King County Jail now, this summer, with this guy. So they were moving him from one cell to another because this cell, it just had a door with a little slider where you can talk through it, not bars. And this guy didn't want to move. And so, as Sergeant Vasquez was speaking to Mr. Silva spat on the sergeant, hitting him in the face and mouth through the little pass-through door in the cell. So then they had to get another officer to try to move him to another cell. Silva covered his window and would not allow the corrections officers to conduct any safety and security checks. He stuffed paper, socks, and other clothing into the edges of the cell door to block the cell door from opening. He covered the cell light with paper and bed linen, so the cell was not observable. He does have that history of spitting on staff and throwing urine and feces mixtures on staff, so they had to assemble an extraction team to move him to a safely observable cell. He spread water and pencils on the floor to make it difficult for the officers entering the cell to maintain their balance. And he thought it would give him a tactical advantage when the officers did finally enter his cell. Well, they did, and Silva began to strike at one of the officers with closed fists. He then grabbed a sharpened pencil and stabbed another officer twice in the head. One puncture wound was to the top of the officer's head. The other stab wound was to his left cheek, approximately 1.5 inches from the man's left eye. The officer shouted, "Weapon, weapon," to alert the other officers that Silva was armed. They had to tase him to subdue him. They were finally able to get him secured in handcuffs. At that point, the officer felt blood dripping down his face and said, "I think he got me." Now, this could be a third strike offense. Let's hope that Governor Inslee doesn't commute his sentence like the third strike guy who's out running around free because Inslee commuted his sentence once. He violated it. They put him back in. Inslee commuted it again, and the guy's in the wind now. Has been for a couple of weeks. But this is what happens when we are as soft on crime as we are around here. This guy, he should have been locked up for life as a repeat offender. But man, say a prayer for these jail guards, corrections officers who have to deal with these animals. And if this is indeed a third strike offense, good riddance to this guy. Next up, in the big lead.
The Big Lead, top trending.
Well, I saw a beautifully reported and photographed story from our news partners at KIRO 7 last night. Shelby Miller's their South Sound Bureau chief, and she had climbed 5,000 feet up Mount Eleanor in the Olympic National Park, and they were tracking because there are too many goats. According to Department of Fish and Wildlife, there are too many mountain goats in Olympic National Park. And so they are airlifting them. They are tranquilizing them, putting a blindfold on them, and then they hang them in a harness from a helicopter, and they're flying them out of Olympic National Park and moving them to the Cascades. Because they say they're not afraid of humans. There was a hiker in 2010 who was killed by a mountain goat. But I know a lot of people who just find these goats to be the most magical of creatures. And I'm one of those people. I got to watch these mountain goats on a rock canyon wall in Utah when I was on a very slow stretch of river, and watching them and their babies going up this sheer rock face with the same confidence that you and I have walking down a sidewalk. They're amazing to watch. And there are a lot of people who are really upset that they're airlifting all these goats from the Olympics to the Cascades.
Just makes me feel closer to nature. Where can you get that up close and personal with a wild animal? You know, it's pretty awesome.
That's hiker Roger Edwards that KIRO 7 talked to. They also talked to Bill Backus, the Olympic National Park helicopter manager.
They'll follow you around, and they'll, I've been backed up against rocks, where they're kind of coming at you. So, it's kind of a mix, it's a little bit scary and a little bit awesome.
Yeah, I think it's much more awesome than scary. Angel McCormick, Washington Fish and Wildlife, says that there's more trouble than there were.
That's where they're starting to have the human problem, right? Because they're following people around for their salts and their sweat and their urine. And so that is not a good situation.
So, yeah, there aren't as many natural salts, I guess, in the Olympics as there are in the Cascades. And so the goats just want to be where the humans have been, where your sweat is dripped and your urine has been urinated. Huh? What? And apparently there are some more natural salts over in the Cascades. So at taxpayer expense, we're airlifting them out. But then once they get them to the Cascades, they're talking about giving hunters some special permits to thin them out even more. They're not indigenous to the Olympics. They are to the Cascades. Hunters brought them into the Olympics about 100 years ago, just, a dozen or two. And then they've multiplied to where there are now 700 over there. But seeing them get airlifted out...
It's funny, right? I think that you can't help but just think, what is that goat thinking, right? As it spins around,
Seeing the goats in high places, at least they're not afraid of heights.
We basically came up to say goodbye. So it's with a kind of a heavy heart.
Yeah, a lot of people said they're going to miss them over in the Olympics. Mount Eleanor, I've never done Mount Eleanor. It sounds like a beautiful hike, and especially if you get a goat as a bonus.
My friend and I, we spent a night up here once with 19 mountain goats kind of running around our little tent, and they're all bedded down on the summit up there, and it was just absolutely phenomenal. And the thought that that won't happen again is just really unfortunate.
Yeah, and I've heard from a lot of people. A good friend of mine, he was sending me texts, and he and his family, they go hiking up there. They love seeing the goats. And I'm curious if you have thoughts on this. They're airlifting goats from one mountain range to another. They're thinking about giving hunting permits to take out even more of the goats.
Okay, I don't like the hunting, but they're just taking them home. They shouldn't have been moved there in the first place.
But the Olympics is the only home they've known.
But they're taking them home where they'll be more comfortable.
I don't know if they'll be more comfortable. They've adapted well.
No,
to
they
the
haven't.
Olympics.
Or they wouldn't be sniffing out people's pee.
Well, that's what they're doing. That's how they've adapted.
No.
They're living. They're thriving.
No, they're just going to take over and start beating people.
Just then bring goat spray.
Them.
Bring goat spray when you go hiking, for crying out.
Just go over there and go hiking.
I don't like it.
Go see I don't like it. Go.
Reverse it. Okay, so I'm going to talk to Shelby Miller, the reporter, on this, because I like goats. I don't know if you heard. On Twitter 2 nights ago, I announced that if I'm elected governor, every child born in the state of Washington will get a baby goat at birth.
This is random, but you know that the park and ride in Linwood? Do you know that right next to it they keep a bunch of goats there?
There are some friends of mine. They have a big piece of property, and they want to clear it. And I have some other friends. They had about 5 goats on their hillside, and they built them a little goat hutch. And there are people who will bring you goats, and then they will clear the blackberry bushes, and you just keep the goats until they've done all their clearing, and then they go back to the owners. But yeah, and I have another friend who's thinking about doing that right now, bringing goats in.
It's pretty smart.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So anyway, I like goats. So anyway, if I'm elected governor, every baby born gets a goat in Washington State. Be an innovative program. Okay, I'll talk to Shelby Miller from KIRO 7 right after Ursula checks the news. That is your big lead for today.
The Big Lead on KIRO Radio.
Okay, more on the goats. Didn't know I was going to do so much goat talk today, but Shelby Miller is available up next. And then drop me a text. Online Trading Academy text line 98973. That's 98973. It's the Dori Monson Show. Stinkily rolls on.
This hour of the Dori Monson